Okay, so we are now recording. I'm going to do this here. Okay, perfect. All right. Hi, Katie. Thanks very much for jumping on this call with me and all of the prospective players that we have joining us, and parents. I'm sure that'll be tuning in at some point. I know the parents have just as many, if not more, questions than the prospective players. As we know, this is a very it's a family decision. It's a family process when going through the recruiting and college selection and wanting to play collegiate sports. It's one of the bigger decisions in a young person's life. So it's important that the family is very well involved in asking the right questions. And so before I go too far into getting started here, we'll introduce you, Ms. Katie Zing, the Associate Athletic Director of Compliance or for Compliance at SIUE, and you've been doing it for over a decade. So we are in very good hands with your leadership and mentorship here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to help and happy to answer all the questions that you got.
Well, thank you very much. We'll jump right into it. I'd like to have the discussion kind of go in a timeline format where we'll start with where our current players are, is that they're in the process or they're looking to get started in the process. They're freshmen through seniors in high school, and just looking for where I need to go with it and kind of see what that journey looks like over the course of their 4 years, and then as well when they get into college. So we'll start just like that so I guess let's start with this. Before even beginning the recruiting process or looking to get into school, when you're looking for a job, you want to make sure that your house is kept in order beforehand. In my day, 20 years ago, before social media and the ability to communicate very quickly with many people, we really just had to make sure that our grades were kept in order and we knew how to write a nice. We used to write emails and actual handwritten letters at that time to college coaches and such. So what is the first step before even beginning searching? What do the players need to be doing at home, I guess, to make sure that they are a recruitable, good prospect?
Sure. I think, there's both things, at home or off the field and on the field that go beyond actual ability. So the big thing for today's world is social media. Even if you have a private account, a lot of people think, oh, I make it a private account, people can't see what I do. But you allow certain people to follow you. And so those people can then share what you have posted. They take screenshots or whatever. So it's really making sure that what you're putting out as an individual is a true representation of who you are, and something that coaches would be a good representation of a school's program. So if you're putting out things with a lot of vulgar words or vulgar phrases, there might be coaches that will choose not to recruit you because that's not someone that they want to put in their program. So that's something that carries on. You mentioned job searches. So right now during recruiting, it's important to make sure what you're putting out on social media is a good representation of yourself. It maintains while you are a student athlete in college. There's actually more rules that kind of get put on you based on where the NCAA's rules sit right now, and corporate sponsorships and name, image, and likeness and things. But then it carries on to once you graduate and applying for a job. When we apply or when we have job applicants here, that's one of the things that we do is we go and look at their social media. What are they putting out in the world? Or is it something that aligns with our vision and our mission here? The things that we value as an institution, or not. So it's really something that people need to be mindful of. But then also kind of just always representing yourself in a positive way. So a lot of coaches look at who you are off the field. If you get pulled off, you get subbed out, how do you react to that? How do you speak to your parents during a visit? How do you speak to your coaches? Those types of things that a lot of people forget about or don't think about. They think, oh, they're just recruiting me based on my soccer ability. And it actually goes so much beyond that.
That's a great point about, the way that you carry yourself. If you get sent off during a game, right? Or like you're saying, or if you get subbed off, or the way that you interact with your parents during a recruiting visit. I think that's something that people don't think about. Again, you're recruiting the person, you're not just recruiting the soccer player. So I think that's a wonderful point for the players and parents to hear. I'm sure there are dozens of parents looking over at their kid right now if they're watching together.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful point. So thank you for that. And then as far as let's start with, I guess, grades to be eligible. We all know, we've all heard a million times that school comes first, and the higher GPA you have, the better test scores you have, the more recruitable you are. But I guess what are some of the expectations? I guess what are some of the minimums, and what really is the new minimum of what you should really be shooting for if you really want to be recruitable? Because I believe it's something like, it's less than 1% of players at the youth level go on to play in college or receive a scholarship. You'll have to correct me on my data there, but it's a very small number, and even smaller for those that, again, are getting money or going to actually see the field relatively quickly in their college career.
Right. Yeah, when you look at the number of youth programs and the number of youth participants nationally, and then the number of college programs, and then even less than that, there's 300 and about maybe 40-ish soccer programs in the country. And that's on the women's side. On the men's side, there's even fewer. So it is a really small percentage of the youth population that has that opportunity to play at the Division I level. But then even still, all of college, it is a lot smaller of a number. One thing that's really important to point out regarding your eligibility in academics is remembering that admissions to college is different than eligibility in the NCAA. They are two completely separate things. So you can be admitted to a school to attend there as a student, but not be eligible under the NCAA standard, and vice versa. So it's really important to make sure that as you're going through the recruiting process and you're starting to identify schools that you're interested in, is that you're paying attention to both things. Because you do sometimes encounter the student that would be eligible for the NCAA, but cannot be admitted to an institution. A great example of that, and what a lot of people think of, are the Ivy League schools, right? Like there's really high admission standards.
Right.
But it goes beyond that. There are a lot of institutions, the way that the NCAA's sliding scale works with your test scores and your GPA, you can be eligible with a really high school GPA, but a really low test score. Whereas institutions, the ones that are still using test scores as part of the admissions process, because that's an evolving world right now as well, they may not, because they just use it as a standard. Here's our bottom level ACT score, regardless of what your high school GPA is. So that's one thing that's important. But on the NCAA side, for Division I, it's pretty simple. It's really four things. You graduate from high school. You earn 16 core courses. Those core courses are courses that your high school has had approved with the NCAA. You earn at least a 2.3 GPA in those 16 core courses. And then you have a test score that matches on the sliding scale that the NCAA has set up. So if people want to see that, if you go to ncaa.org, hover over student athletes and click on, I think it's a want to play college sports, maybe. It's the very first link. Click on that. There is a boatload of information there. It'll see both for Division I, Division II, and Division III. For the NAIA, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, ncaa.org.
ncaa.org. Yep.
So it's a great place for the players to start even before they, because we'll get into talking about what used to be the NCAA clearinghouse, but now there are other things that need to get done to register to become eligible. But so starting at ncaa.org is probably a good place to start to get some of this information and get something of a roadmap for what is expected while in high school, and then when you actually start the recruiting and college search process.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. So social media, make sure that you clean up, keep your house in order, and then grades, test scores, obviously the higher the better, but understanding that there are different desires or different levels of being eligible versus being admitted to a program, and they kind of work. Some are higher on the athletics, eligibility side, whereas other institutions have the higher requirements to be admitted. Great information there as well. So, okay, so we've cleaned up our social media. We are keeping our grades up. We've looked at some of the information on the ncaa.org. So now I've decided I want to be a college soccer player. And I know we could ask that question for every different sport, because I think it's important for players to understand that lacrosse has different rules from soccer, has different rules from basketball. So we'll just talk soccer specific. But so where are we getting started then? As far as I've decided I want to be a player, what do I have to do before I can, a coach can even talk to me, or I should even look to write them?
Sure. So the important thing to know is that as a prospective student athlete or parent, you can reach out to a college coach at any time. They just can't necessarily respond. So sending an email, sending a text message, calling, you can absolutely do that. The coach just may not actually be able to respond to you or be able to have a phone conversation with you until June 15th after your sophomore year in high school.
June 15th after your sophomore year of high school. So you can write a coach, all of that prior to June 15th of your sophomore year. And it's my understanding that at that time, you may not hear back at all.
Yep.
And that's not the worst thing in the world. It doesn't mean a coach doesn't care about you or whatnot.
Right.
But if you're a freshman or a sophomore in your, let's just call it arguably your, or prior to June 15th, don't get heartbroken if you don't hear back from a coach, or you might receive a relatively generic response inviting you to come to an ID camp, thanking you for the interest, and they'll be in touch with you at a later date, or just getting a reply saying that these are the NCAA rules. We can catch up at a later time. So I know some players say, oh, this college is just looking to try to get money out of me or something to get me to come to the ID camp. They're not really interested. If you get a reply like that, it's not necessarily the case.
Yes, that is a great point. A lot of coaches use the exception for camp communication as a way to reply and show interest. So let's say you're a freshman and maybe you have seen a college coach at some of your games and you want to reach out to them. They can be there to watch you. They just can't talk to you yet. So when they reply and say, hey, thanks for your interest, we can't talk to you yet, but here's our camp information, that's their way of saying, hey, we would like to see you more. Camps are a really great way to get recruited. I know that it's been tough last year since many were canceled, and then the summer's still kind of up in the air. But camps are a great way to get, into a coach's, list of top prospects. Be seen not just in gameplay. They see how you train, they see what your work ethic is like in that setting. So that June 15th, some coaches respond to you with information and some coaches just don't. That's just their philosophy. They get inundated with all sorts of inquiries, and so some coaches just decide, hey, I'm drawing a line, I'm not responding to anybody. So before that June 15th date, don't take it to heart. That may just be that coach.
Sure. Okay. And then, to touch on, something that you mentioned there, that getting recruited and coming or going to an ID camp, or when you go for an official or unofficial visit, which we'll get to a little bit later. One of the questions that when I was coaching in college, one of the important questions that we suggested players be asking when they're going on their various visits was to be sure to ask those college coaches how many players on their current roster were found during those ID camps,
Yeah.
like that, because the coaches generally want to let you know that we are actually finding players for our roster from those camps. They're not just, and I don't want to badmouth in any way, they're not just a money grab or a way for the school to generate revenue. They really do serve a wonderful purpose in getting players into the school and into the program and onto the team. So I think that's wonderful information there. So we'll move on. So they're going to, they've written, or I guess we haven't written to the coaches yet. I guess, what are some of the, I guess, do's and don'ts in writing to coaches? Are there limitations to the number of communications that can take place? Again, in my era, social media, sending a text message was not a thing. Sending a tweet was not a thing. And now during, pandemic, Zoom and Skype and all those things are, I'm sure, now have rules in place where maybe a year ago they were not as regulated, or maybe more heavily regulated than they are now. So I know I've given you a lot there. Let's touch on the different types of communication, limitations and restrictions, things like that. And then for that, just listening to everyone listening, that these rules are always evolving. And so it's important to be sure that you're checking the proper websites to make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date information.
Yeah, that was a great point. The NCAA never stays stagnant with recruiting rules, as they are often evolving. So, one of the things that has changed over the last maybe like 3 or 4 years, that June 15th date is now the floodgates. It is for all forms of communication other than publicly viewable social media. So we'll hold social media off into a different category, but as far as phone calls, Zoom, FaceTime, and Skype, any of that, they all are considered phone calls for the NCAA's purpose. Text messages and emails are actually considered the same thing. So it's that June 15th date, and then there's no stipulation on how frequently coaches communicate with you after that June 15th date. It doesn't matter. Emails, text message, phone calls, doesn't matter. That's one of the things that the NCAA did away with, which is really nice.
Very important. So, and also, again, to probably touch on that, again, even though there are limited to no restriction, don't take it personally. They're very busy, and they've got thousands and thousands of people writing to them throughout the year. Their season, especially during the current landscape, has been altered, where they might have 3 games in a week or something along those lines. That they are busy, and they do have families and stuff, even though many would believe that college soccer coaches are not terribly lovable individuals.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, it's interesting, with that June 15th date, there's only so many phone calls a coach can make in a day. When, if the average call is, 20, maybe 30 minutes of a get to know you, there's only so many of them they can make. And if they have a list of, maybe 20 prospects in your class, they probably can't call all 20 on day one. It doesn't mean you're any less important or anything like that. It's just truly a time constraint. So yeah. One thing on social media, I forgot to say this. So as far as communication with coaches, they can, this is a really bizarre world of NCAA rules, I will point that out. They can like, share, favorite, retweet at any point. They can follow you, friend you, doesn't matter, at any point. But they can't have any publicly viewable communication. So they can't comment on anything. If they retweet something, they can't add a comment to it. That's something from the prospect, a parent, a club coach, anything related to the recruitable age, social media. Wow. So yeah, and then once you get to that June 15th date, they can start sending you a direct message or a Facebook message or something that is a private communication through a social media pattern, because it's considered essentially the same as an email.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. I'm sure there are so many more questions to get into on that.
Oh yeah, it's bizarre.
For another time, but wow, some I would have never even thought of. That's just remarkable.
Yeah.
So we've been in touch with college coaches. We've gone through all the processes of becoming, let's call it recruitable, up to now. How about things like National Signing Day, a letter of intent versus a verbal commitment? Those are ever changing. Touch on those just a little bit for me, so that players know and parents know what the differences are. And I guess what are some dates and things to think of?
Yeah, there's a couple important dates when it comes to that. So verbal offers are just that. They're verbal, they're non-binding on either party, but they're fairly common. So someone commits, you see a lot of posts on social media of a student saying that they're committing to an institution. It's just verbal. The NCAA rule is that a coach cannot provide you a written scholarship offer. So not necessarily the actual aid agreement, but saying, I'm going to give you $8,000 scholarship. They can't provide that in writing until August 1st of the senior year. So
August 1st,
it's pretty late in the process. But there's a lot of verbal offers before that. And then signing date is usually the second Wednesday in November. That's when it starts, and it runs through August 1st. So something else that's changed in the last few years is they changed soccer signing date and moved it from February to November, and then now have left it for that whole time to run from November to August 1st. So at that point, that's when you can actually sign a scholarship agreement for the NCAA. And it would come with a national letter of intent and the school's actual scholarship offer. You have to get both things, and then that's when it is binding. So both if the student signs an NLI, it is binding on the student to attend that institution and for the institution to provide that scholarship.
Got it. But so a verbal commitment can be withdrawn from either party. However, the national letter of intent is binding, and that is an arrangement or an agreement between the player, the school, and the team, the coach. Okay, wonderful. That's great information. That's something that I'm sure players and parents are very much confused by in a lot of ways, because there's just so many different things to think about now. Amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah. And with one thing with the NLI, they always point out that you're signing the NLI with the school. You're not signing the NLI with the coach. So it is a commitment to that institution and the institution committing to you, not necessarily that coach. So that sometimes it gets a little confused in there as well.
Great clarification. So let's move on to then. So now we've committed. We've been accepted. We've done our national letter of intent. Now I'm preparing. I'm an incoming freshman. I guess, what is an incoming freshman looking to or needing to do as far as, different credit load requirements, I guess, for the university compared to the NCAA? I imagine there are some differences there, similarly to what the GPA and test scores requirements are. Touch on that just a little bit, please.
Sure. So yeah, once you enroll in start classes as a freshman, the NCAA has some academic standards that you have to meet each term, each year. Essentially, their standard is putting you on a 5-year graduation plan. And so in order to remain eligible, you always have to hit their benchmarks at certain places. So as a freshman, that first semester, it's always maintaining a GPA. And this is one of those things that's different between the institution and the NCAA. So here at SIUE, I can say that you always have to have a 2.0. The NCAA actually lets you have a little bit below that as a freshman. But at one of the other standards is that you have to be in good academic standing. And so at most institutions, a 2.0 is good academic standing. So for here, you always have to have a 2.0 GPA. You have to pass 6 credit hours in your fall semester. And then you have to pass 24 credits before the start of your sophomore year. So most institutions, you've got to be in at least 12 credit hours fall and spring semester. Many institutions will usually put students in about 15, because 15 is usually on a 4-year graduation path, depending on a program and some other specifics in there. But generally, that's about where you're at. And so usually those benchmarks, you're enrolled in those hours and you should be well on your path.
Gotcha. And so I imagine also the 15 credit hours is also something of a cushion that in the event that a player needs to drop out of a class, I know that's something that I think there's, I don't want to say controversy around, but that you need to make sure that you're meeting the credit requirements, and players, not, or even athletes, non-athletes as well, dropping classes is something that happens relatively frequently. And so making sure that players, I guess, making sure that they're working with their counselor or compliance officer at the university, to make sure that they're setting themselves up with some cushion, to make sure that they can keep their eligibility and not being, I guess, handcuffed into staying in certain classes, because they need to meet certain minimum requirements. That's a great piece of information to share with us. Thank you very much. So then, okay, so to remain eligible, you've said that we have to keep a 2.0 GPA. We have to be taking, was it 6 credit hours during the fall semester?
So you've got to enroll in at least 12, and then you've got to pass at least 6.
Got it. And it's the fall semester because that's historically when soccer is played, or what is the logic between it? Why?
That is for anybody. Yep. Football is different. Football does actually have a higher standard, but for as long as you were a qualifier out of high school, it's 6 credit hours every term. This is every semester, whether you are a freshman or you're a junior going into your senior year. That's just one of their rules, is 6 credit hours every semester. Usually the basis for those numbers is to make sure that you can, so let's say something goes terribly wrong in a semester and you take 15 credit hours, but you only pass 6. By only passing 6, you should still be able to correct your path to maintain the NCAA's next benchmark for your eligibility. So it's kind of like building blocks.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense. And then as a senior, if you, let's say you were taking 18 credit hours in the 3 years previous, could a senior be taking potentially less than or I guess enrolled in or passing less than 6 credit hours if that's all that they had to?
So if a student only has, say, 3 credit hours left to graduate, that's all they have to enroll in, and it's all that they have to pass. But that's only their last semester.
Understood. Got it. So good to know. Well, thank you there. That's why you'll see sometimes seniors, I guess, will just have less of a workload because they've done the 18 credits or something leading up to that, or they'll get credit hours toward their master's program, or another program is another way that they can do that. And we can touch on that another time. We want to focus more, I guess, on those that are incoming toward college as opposed to those that are on their way out. Tell me just a little bit then about, we're now student athletes. Can you tell me just a little bit about like nutritional supplements and things of that nature? Because I know that for years and years and years, this has been a big hot topic to talk about, and it could, a simple one ingredient or something you don't know is in something could be the difference of being eligible or not.
Yeah, this is a great area for people to educate themselves on. It's a really weird world of supplements. So the NCAA has a banned drug list or a banned substance list. It's got all of your normal street drugs on it, all of your normal performance enhancers, masking agents, those types of things on the list. You can find that on ncaa.org if you wanted to look into it. The problem with the supplement world is if you go to a supplement store, can be a very reputable one. It could be something that, a protein supplement you buy at Walmart, something like that. They have a label on it that says, here's all of our ingredients. What's really messed up about it is that does not have to be true. The FDA does not regulate supplements. So it could have a banned substance in it, not be on the label. And if you test positive for that substance, there is nothing anyone can do to help you. So this happened a few years ago, just before the college football championship, the national championship. A school had a couple players test positive to something that they didn't know was in the supplement. So once you're at your NCAA institution, it's really important to be communicating with your athletic trainer and then your strength and conditioning coach. You as a student can reach out to the NCAA's, the Drug Education Center. That's not what it's called, and I'm completely drawing a blank, but every campus has a drug resource officer. So ours is our head athletic trainer, and he can put a substance through the NCAA system, and they give you essentially like a stoplight themed answer. Green, you should be fine. Yellow, maybe. Red, they've known for that product to have banned substances in it.
Got it. Okay. So every institution has somebody on the staff that will do that? Okay, that's great to know.
Yep.
But it may vary from who it is, from institution to institution.
Yeah, usually at every institution, an athletic trainer should be able to help you with that. While their drug education officer might be different, your athletic trainer can help you or find you the correct resource.
Got it. Okay. So long story short, know what you're putting in your body, check it against the NCAA's rules before putting it in your body. I think the rule of thumb there. Okay, perfect. What about let's go to just a couple questions that I guess I'll ask that are pertaining more to the current environment for a player that is looking to be recruited. During COVID, I guess, what are some of the things that you've seen that have changed very quickly that that maybe some prospective players and their families have overlooked? Maybe some, I guess something like, for me, it would be, I've had to learn how to really be more professional in my Zoom call capabilities that, a year ago, I never knew how to do a Zoom call like this. And now just making sure that, just being presentable, it's no different than going in on your official interview or having your resume cleaned up. Share just a couple things with me about how players needed to be recruited during this specific time. And hopefully we're out of it before too long. But things that they need to be really concerned with that maybe a year ago they weren't.
Yeah, it's weird to use the term professionalism when you're talking about a high school aged individual, but that is a lot of what people are looking for. What's in your background? What is what's your other noise? So I just got a phone call earlier. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, it's what else is going on. Now that the dead period has been extended through May 31st, it'll be 14 months since Division I coaches have been able to go off campus or bring students on campus, which is unfathomable. Like, wow, that is crazy that we're supposed to have a recruiting class and we've never been able to bring those students on campus. There are things, that you can still go to the campus. You just can't have any communication with the coach while you're there. But you can call them beforehand. You can call them afterwards. You can set up a Zoom before or after. A lot of virtual tours, things like that. Things that they're posting to a school's YouTube page. What research are you doing? Because the coach, normally, and when we live in the visit space, you're coming to campus and the coach shows you everything. You don't have to do a whole lot of research on the front end. Well, now we can't bring you, on campus. So what are you doing to research and show your commitment and your interest in the institution as well? Gotcha. The coach, it's very similar to interviewing for a job. If I'm interviewing someone to work at SIUE, I want to make sure that they want to work at SIUE. It's not just that I like them, it's important for them to like me, and the same in the recruiting process.
So would you say then also, because we're probably going to get less opportunities to meet with that coach, there really is a higher urgency that the few opportunities we do get to be seen either on field or on video or in person in a non on the field opportunity to meet with the coach, you really do have to make sure that you are sharp and professional, because you might not get another opportunity. Which I think will lead me to my final question that I'll ask you here. How has, I guess, how have visits changed, in that, historically there were X amount of official visits that you were allowed to participate in. I believe it was unlimited unofficial visits. But I guess, how has that changed during the COVID era, and what should players and parents be thinking about and asking and be expecting, I guess, from college coaches, if they're maybe not getting invitations for official visits because they don't exist at that particular institution or something along those lines? Please share just a little bit with us on that.
Sure. I'll start with the difference between the two. So an official visit is one in which the institution pays some or all of the expenses for the recruit and their family to come to visit campus. So meals, a hotel room, mileage, flight, something like that. All of those things make it an official visit, and you're limited to 5 total to Division I schools, but you can only make 1 to any one school. And then an unofficial visit is one in which the family completely pays for, and you're unlimited, no matter how many schools, no matter how many to the same school. You can do as many of those as you want. And the first date for those is August 1st, before your junior year. So those phone calls, text messages, emails start June 15th. And then by August 1st, you can start actually visiting the campus. We are very hopeful, fingers crossed, that for current juniors and younger, that August 1st of 2021, we will be back in a normal world, but we don't know what that looks like. So right now, Division I, they haven't been able to have those because of COVID. So there's been a lot of Zoom options. Normally when you come on a visit, you meet with the academic advisor, you meet with the strength coach, you might meet with the athletic trainer. And so now it's doing all of those virtually instead.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's a great piece of info there to make sure that we're setting the right expectations. I think is some of the things that I know as a player I was disappointed sometimes with some of my visits, or the lack of interest that it appeared to be. However, it was not necessarily a lack of interest. It was just I was writing a coach prior to the date that they could respond to me, or we were not able to do another official visit because of we've met the capacities on those. So well, before I let you go, I want to just say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and providing some of this info. We'll be looking to hopefully get back out on the field very, very soon with I guess let's call it more normal capacities. And just want to say thank you so much for the work that you do. You are an integral part of the machine, I guess, that is collegiate sports. And I think people often overlook that the many questions that we as players and parents have, you're the person that is, it's your job to know what those answers are, and dealing with we're not sure what to even think about because they're always changing. It's your job to make sure you know what to think about because it's always changing. So really, thank you so much, Katie. We really enjoyed it. And I know that our players and families have really benefited from this time together. I really can't thank you enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here, and best of luck in your recruiting processes.
Really, thanks again very much. And we'll be in touch another time. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Katie.